Welcome to Finding the Frame. I'm your host, Xander Miller, and and what we do here is we do discernment and dialogos. I try and explain discernment and dialogos by practicing discernment and dialogos, and I do that, of course, within dialogue with people I know. And today, we have a friend of mine, a family man, and a freedom fighter, my friend Dan. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Xander. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's and I think today we're going to talk about we're going to sort of focus the conversation a little bit on this thing that's been picking on your mind, is this article on vampires that you saw
hmm
on CNN. So I think that should be interesting. When did you first come across the article?
I think I stumbled on it like on a new news aggregation website, right? So somebody had already highlighted it. It's not like I go to CNN and peruse. And it's not like I'll never go there. Like if I'm looking for a perspective, I know where to find that perspective. So anyway, so it was on a new news aggregation site. So at some point somebody thought it was worth visiting, and I'm like, and it kind of just struck me, just a little bit of curiosity more than anything. And I think the headline on the news aggregation site already had a little bit of moralistic implication on it. And then I read it, and then it just struck me, like sort of punched me in the gut.
Well,
And it's
what's
not the
going
more
on here?
mature. Yeah, what's going on here? Like what what is like there was on several different levels, and one of those
Okay.
levels was how did this make the news, right? Like
Yeah.
how did this become newsworthy that then CNN is doing like this kind of gentle expose of this,
So
very marginal lifestyle.
So what we're the article we're talking about is called Inside the World of Real Life Vampires in New Orleans and Atlanta. I'll have a link, an archived link to in the description of either if you're listening on watching a video or listening to the audio of this, you can dig up the article. We're not going to go over it line by line because that's not our thing here. We are finding the frames, which means um through this process of dialogos, through listening to each other and and trying to discern the truth, we're going to try and uh find out like uh what's the good, the true, and the beautiful of what we're talking about. What's Christ's plan uh in this relationship and what we're doing here, so we can have the best possible video, but also we're going to be doing the whole iron sharpening iron thing on ourselves, and we've learning more about each other as well. Hopefully, that's the goal of this. Um, with
Right
that
on.
article, yeah, with that article, yeah, I think there's a couple things going on there. Like it struck me too. Like you sent it to me because you're writing a piece about it and you just wanted some feedback, and I think that's what we'll if we can figure out like what is really sort of picking at you about this article, I
hmm
think it'll be, we'll both be in a better place because I
Yeah.
think
So um, I suspect um, one of the first things that struck me is that as interesting and crazy at times as this last few years have been, this still stands out, right?
yeah,
So there's a lot of things I'm still not surprised to see. In fact, one of the things I was thinking about in terms of just vampires in general. I'm not surprised that vampire culture exists. Our culture has been sort of fascinated with it. We've explored it in Hollywood. There's some history there. That there's some roots in some real stories and narratives that have been shared throughout Europe. There's a curiosity about it, so I'm not surprised that they exist. The first thing that blew me away was kind of the tone of the article
mm,
and the way it was featured. Right,
yeah,
so it's quite literally the frame and the way CNN is framing it that I think got under my skin initially, and I couldn't shake
yeah.
it. So days later, I found myself still thinking about it, and I'm like, of all the curiosities and all the crazy things you can stumble across, why am I still thinking about this article, and why is it important? And those are two things I think
Well, I think that's
that
it's
really stuck out.
that really stuck out about it is like what, what's the moral position of vampire culture to you, right? Because I think,
Yeah,
you're a freedom loving guy.
yeah,
So I imagine like
yeah,
there's sort of to each their own aspect of this, but
yeah, yeah.
what is
You know,
thinking about it, like what about the way that they were describing it that sort of bothered you about the CNN article?
okay, so that's an interesting way to put it because I think like politically, I've gone through quite a bit of a transformation, over the last 35 years, right?
Hmm.
So, I got in politics incredibly young. I was curious about politics, as much as 35 years ago. As much as 30 years ago, I was involved in politics as a young person in this party and that party. So I've had a really, you know, I've followed along a very wide spectrum, in the political arena, looking at things through various different lenses. I found myself quite recently kind of falling into this libertarian camp where it's like, just like you said, it's kind of to each their own, and you want to give people enough room that they can sort of express themselves and be themselves, and not moralize in a way that you want that to return on you, right? And
Hmm.
then start trying to conform your way of dealing with the world to another vision of dealing with the world. So it's not so much laissez-faire as much as drawing a line where all of a sudden the implications of the way you want to conduct
Yeah.
yourself is changing the culture that you live in such a dramatic way that you can't do that anymore, right? So I sort of like the idea that our rights, your rights sort of end, where the face of the person that you disagree with begins. That type of notion.
Yeah.
So this changes that. This changes that dynamic because I'm like, is this some kind of like moral panic for me over somebody's lifestyle? Am I sort of wagging my finger in a way that I don't appreciate other people doing to me? And I think this is different.
Yep. Okay. Is what's not shocking for you is that there is vampire culture, right? So
Right.
that these people exist. That part of the article isn't sort of like what's getting at you. And it's
Yeah.
not necessarily that CNN would cover it. It's how they covered it, sort of too.
Yeah, I would say when I really ask myself that question, that those are the things that really pop out at me. So it's the language that they use, it's the tone of the article, and it's the implication of morality. So
Mhm.
this isn't some disenfranchised, yeah, this isn't some overview of an idea, and this isn't some. It's not even an investigation, and there's the tone is it's kind of tender, in certain aspects of it. It's like this exploration, and there's also the implication
Yeah,
that we are not allowed to judge this particular lifestyle, and the things that would probably shock most people about vampires are this idea that what is a vampire? A vampire is somebody that feasts on somebody's blood, right? Is
yeah.
consuming somebody else
In
for
the
some kind
article,
of
they also
nourishment.
say someone's energy, like their psychic energy, which like
Yeah,
that's a better thing,
yeah.
right? It's like you'd
Right.
rather have some.
We're not just after blood, right? There's
Yeah,
a couple levels to this
like
energy that they're after, feeding on. So, and
yeah,
yeah, and so part of it, the thing that gets under your skin is the language, and it's the implication that these ideas are. We shouldn't even be shocked about it. Like we're beyond that,
mhm.
So that's beyond reproach. We're just going to look at this in such a way that we get closer to understanding who they are as people. So
Well, I think
we're gonna.
I just want to say like I think there's more to it that like there definitely is a tender tone to it. Like there is a promotion, almost a celebration of the vampire
Celebration.
cu- of
Yeah,
the vampire culture,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's also I think
But it's
promoting
it's
it, but
muted, right? It's muted.
it's sort of centering.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mhm.
Is it that muted? I mean it's
Okay, it's everywhere. It's all throughout it.
when
I
we're
think
talking
it's
about
I
the
think it's a
article,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So
Because it's
yeah, the
definitely
article. So
taking you to a
throughout the whole
place.
article, there's a lot of different places where there's like an exaltation or a rising up of a particular thing. So like, for example, if the most shocking thing about a vampire is that they eat each other, or feast, as they like to call it.
Not off of each
Um,
other necessarily, but of they said like willing loved ones, right? Or
Yeah,
living.
right.
Oh,
Which
sorry,
is like the language they use there. That was pretty crazy by itself. It's like like I think it's like somewhat willing or sometimes willing or something like that. And again, it was downplaying, right? So it's downplaying something that you'd normally find shocking, that the vast majority of people would normally find shocking. It turns it into the tiniest little footnote, right? So that by itself, there's the implication that, don't be shocked about it, don't even worry about it. Like, let's just move on to the more important stuff, right? And I
Yes.
think that's explicit and it's implicit, right?
And
And so that.
and just to sort of say like the last two sections of where the article goes is what people get wrong about vampires, and it's saying, that's the second last section, sort of saying like, oh yeah, so all the evil portrayals of vampires, these real life vampires aren't evil, right? Or
Mhm.
aren't dark. They just it actually sort of makes a thing is like it's not necessarily they do weird things where it's like they're saying it's vampire culture isn't about romanticizing vampires. Like it's sort of where that's
Yeah.
an obviously false statement, right?
Right.
Because at
Right.
some
Yeah. Yeah.
level it has to be about that.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
why would you use the symbolism and the mythology at all if you're doing
Hmm.
this thing that's unconnected to the creatures of the night? And then the final section is it's called "There's More Than Life to Vampires," which is really the humanization
Hmm.
of these people in the vampire culture. Like it's a really sort of like the
Hmm.
vampires are people too type thing.
Yeah.
Like it's which is like even though
Yeah.
they're trying not to be people at some level, they're
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
too, right? So and we should
Yeah.
yeah. So this is also humanity, even though they're trying not to be human in some sense.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah. I think that's a good way to put it. So it's the humanizing of the thing, and the thing's complicated, right? Because the thing is like it's a culture, it's the act, it's the belief system, and it wants to humanize it, make it accessible, but also it wags your finger. So the author is
Who
wagging the
are you to
finger at
judge?
us.
Yeah.
Who are we to judge,
And
right?
it's sort of a bizarre thing because like it's exactly like they're trying not to be, the whole point is to be something at least different from human, or
Hmm.
maybe you could say more than human,
Hmm.
or like, but it's definitely sort of this rejection of their human
Hmm.
nature, right? To say I am a vampire, I am this creature of the night, I feed off of blood, or I feed off of the psychic energy of people, right? That's a rejection
Hmm.
of, well certainly of Christianity, of sort of like this idea of connecting to the Holy Spirit and being filled through vitality through the Holy Spirit and through Christ. It's in
Hmm.
But it's also sort of this fundamental rejection of like trying to sustain yourself. It's like, no, I feed off of other people. And that's
Hmm.
very interesting. But it's also sort of like making yourself unique by sort of saying that you're not, in some way you're not human, or you're different from humans, but
Hmm.
then also wanting to, at this in the article they're saying no, but they're humans too. Like they're
Yeah,
intentionally trying
you
to
gotta
be
play both
outsiders,
sides. Yeah,
but then we also
yeah.
we have to
Hmm.
it's like a big thing Marxists like to do is with a lot of what they do now is centering the margins, right? So bringing centering the things of
Yeah.
the margins, and it's and what and certainly like they do that with all sorts of different communities, but it's especially sort of jarring, and it's because it's following that article is following that sort of the steps of that humanization and doing that. But it's jarring because the whole culture is about not being human and not being centered, like being this
Hmm.
outsider. So it's like
Hmm.
set march um centering the marginalized who are in some sense seeking marginalization, or
Yeah, it's just
romanticizing
it feels
marginalization.
it feels like super disingenuous, right?
Yes.
From that perspective. So you're sort of selling yourself as the outsider, but then you're really trying to implement those ideas into the bigger framework and just accept it, right? Just take it as it is. Really don't even question it. There's no reason to stop at any of these obvious questions of like and I think that was another thing that kind of shocked me is like, what is the outlet, right? Where are we hearing this? Where is this story? Well, the author is like, they're positioning it as a culture piece, a lifestyle piece, and even the tone of the article and the writing of the article, it's it goes back to like the romanticizing of it, and going into the depths of the downtown and New Orleans, and there's kind of like this magic and this history and the Creole culture and voodoo and all this other stuff. So they're obviously positioning it as this extraordinarily um, an interesting, intriguing lifestyle at the margins, but then pushing it onto the bigger, framework of our culture, of our civilization. So it's like, there it is. We know it exists over there, but you're not paying attention to it, but you should pay attention to it. And here's how we're going to explore it. We're going to do it in this, in a subtle way, but then also in this explicit way. And so one of the things that I think punched me in the gut was that there was a language that I recognized. There was a pattern of the language, and you just kind of alluded to it, that it's looking at vampirism through woke culture, right?
Yeah.
It is an article, and I'm not even so sure that the author is so woke, although I really don't know enough about her. I did a very kind of a cursory review as to
CNN journalist has to be, it's
yeah,
a certain
yeah,
level of
yeah, yeah, yeah,
woke to,
yeah,
in order
yeah,
to
yeah.
get to be in that, to have that position and to write
Or
that. So
you've got to sell it, right? You're
yeah,
gonna you have an idea, you got to sell it within this framework, and this is
yeah.
how it's kind of positioned. So the language, right, gave it away, and that's, I think, that really tipped me off as to what the article was doing, and where the moralizing was coming from, was using the language where we could take any number of different ideas that have been sort of parading through Main Street, that were at the extreme margins of our society just a few years ago, swap those words out, and the article would still work, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
so,
There's definitely a Mad Lib uh power of any sort of Marxist article you read, right? Where, because
yeah,
and within the different frameworks, right? Like critical race theory,
mm-hmm,
queer theory,
mm-hmm,
um, what are the other big ones, like critical pedagogy, classical Marxism, uh, the fat studies, like any of these things, you can basically like you can see the framework quite quickly
yeah,
evolve, and you can do this sort of thing. It's like, well, you just change what the property is, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Instead of the classic, it's private property, where we'll just change that to um a normality or normalcy, and then you have queer Marxism. If you
yeah,
if you take that property and make it into whiteness, and then you have critical race theory, right? So you just sort of
mm-hmm.
take one concept, insert the other concept, and then this whole you can play the Marxist game
Right,
with
yeah, yeah.
anything,
So
right?
this
So
is
there's
so
so
I want to quote, I just want to make just one
yeah.
quote from the article, and this is where it just it just was totally revealed itself. So at a certain point in the idea of, like, not wagging our fingers at vampires, and and their lifestyle, and the normalizing them, and making us empathetic to the
Mhm.
struggles of vampires raising children, or just trying to be accepted. They quote a professor who says human vampires make accessible the infinite potential that exists for exposing and unfixing the repressive and oppressive categories out of which marginalization is born. And I'm like, bingo, right? So it
Yeah.
didn't take me very long to
Yeah.
unpack it and realize what they're trying to say. This is just another category, so get with the program, right?
I
That
don't
was
think it's just
basically,
another category. It's just it's because they want to disrupt the normal and disrupt the like it's actually, and it's a very effective one, because they're actually the contradiction of centering a community that seeks
yeah,
marginalization is
yeah,
especially effective for, and especially disruptive in the way we want it to be disruptive, right?
right,
Because
yeah,
there's a certain,
absolutely,
yeah, because there's certain contradictions there, like because a lot of like marginalized,
yeah,
like people who are marginalized for reasons either beyond their control, or
yeah,
that are not, they're not necessarily seeking marginalization, right? but
right, right, yeah.
but if you're,
They've been sort of pushed to the margins.
yeah,
Yeah,
being pushed to the margins, right? For
yeah,
and sometimes for like for things that are beyond their control, sometimes maybe it's a character flaw, or something that they should just do. But even then, even if they have like a chip on their shoulder that's marginalizing them, it's
mhm,
not that they're seeking marginalization, but there's something about um like the vampire, like the vampire motif, right? Where you're seeking to be a creature of the night, you're seeking to be an outsider, right?
mhm,
Like
mhm.
that's actually that's
You're
what's been
living in the shadows, right?
that's
Yeah,
what's been romanticized to you,
yeah,
and that's what you're seeking out.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's especially potent
yeah,
to
yeah, Yeah.
try and center these people
Yeah.
who are in their
Yeah.
nature. So trying to seek the margin and they'll just run to the outside again. So you can see
Yeah.
if Marxists who want to ultimately destroy the center and just have everything
Mhm.
equal, right? It's always the end game is always to destroy the center, destroy the whiteness, destroy the private property, destroy the normal, destroy the thinness, destroy whatever is causing this
Agreement power structure.
hierarchy of
Yeah.
being to occur, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so obviously centering something that's trying to get to the outside and will just keep on running towards the outside again, or encourage everyone else to run to the outside, because if everyone becomes vampires, even better,
Yeah.
right? Because then they're all just running for the margins, and you've finished
Yeah.
your program right from the beginning,
Yeah.
right?
Well, okay, so it's interesting. So in the same breath, they say, right? So in this unfixing process, vampires are therapeutic, right? They're therapeutic for the culture. So so that's the big tell. That's what you know.
Yeah,
That's what this is about to the author. That's what this is about
yeah,
to the Marxist ideology. Is that we need to undergo our own therapy. We need to get adjusted to these marginal lifestyles, marginal ideas that are and they must feed off the center, right? We must send them to the center, and we must experience the therapy of being,
yeah.
having
And
our
this
culture
and
change.
and this idea of centering them is glorifying them and making them the model. And the model then
Yeah,
is to be the rebel and run away from the center, right? So
yeah,
it was ultimately destroy the centering
mm-hmm.
process, which is what the
Mm-hmm.
Marxist goal is. And you can sort of see that, like, if you want to connect that to Christianity, it's like they want to have everyone running away from Christ. They got sort of the Gnosticism of they don't want the unifying principles, or well, let's get rid of that, right? So we'll have here's these people who have really identified with being the outsiders that feed off of the energy of those on the inside, and so we'll just take those people and make that the model. So hopefully everyone will be like that, right? And that's sort of the
Mm-hmm.
Gnostic thing of
Mm-hmm.
of 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 running away from any sort of structure or rule, and that's what they see. Then they see as the therapeutic is like that will give them. Look, then you can anything is possible. It's the infinite
Right.
possibilities is what their Gnostics are
Yeah,
after.
and that's the other thing that hit me. I think is that to me it's so extreme. And again, it's not extreme because we never talk about it or it doesn't exist in the culture, but the act of normalizing it, right, is
Yes.
so extreme because it's such an obviously extreme set of choices and lifestyle that why would anybody even think that this is possible, right? Why would anybody think that this is kind of normal, right?
Yeah. And why would you want, it sort of has that connection of, you know, trying to be something that you couldn't possibly be, right?
Yeah,
In the sense of like, there's people who want to be animal spirits and things now too, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, but so it has that connection as well. And there's another interesting connection that I sort of want to bring in here too, because I think that
Mm-hmm.
and we talked about this on the phone, so this part may not be as organic, but but it's relevant to this discussion. I told you about how um a big part of Marxism is to separate identities from their essences, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you sever the identity and then you can wear it as a mask. And that's what you see is when Marxists adopt an institution or a structure, they'll take it and uh they'll sever it from its identity. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
sever the identity from its essence. So for example,
Mm-hmm.
if you have uh a news organization that's about seeking the truth, right?
Yeah.
And doing journalism. Well, if you separate it from that thing that makes it what it is, right? That
Mm-hmm.
essence of doing good journalism, then you just have the identity, you have the institution, and then you can
Mm-hmm.
wear it as a mask, like or like as a skin suit to
Yeah.
spread your ideology further. And that's exactly what Marxists do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You separate it from doing journalism, and then you can use it to spread your propaganda,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and in a sense, I identify that as with abomination or
Mm.
skin chasers or even vampires, because once you're separated from your essence, or
Mm.
as an institution or as a person, you lose that connection to the Holy Spirit that 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 gives us life and vitality, and you become
Mm.
vampire like because you need other
Yeah.
people to pay attention to you to feed your identity, because the identity isn't self-sustaining anymore. Like
Hmm.
CNN, once it's separated from being a journalism, it needs other people to still believe that it's
Yeah.
CNN, or else it's nothing, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's if it's
Hmm.
not the journalism out, the idea that CNN is a journalism outlet is no
Yeah.
longer sustained by any connection to the essence of being a journalism outlet. It's only
Yeah.
sustained by other people believing that, right?
Yeah,
So,
which is honestly on some level, just on the CNN
mhm,
component of it, that was part of the shock for me, that I'm like,
yeah,
they're still peddling this kind of stuff. So, um,
yeah. Where am I going with it?
they're
Is there like a so they're like there's a vampiric nature to what CNN has become. So it's sort of like the vampire journalism
mm,
reporting or celebrating
yeah,
vampirism, right?
that's perfect.
Yeah.
It's
The-
yeah, it's crested, right?
Yeah.
This kind of journalism has crested with the story of the vampire, and that's kind of shocking. We could easily turn the page or keep scrolling, but I think it's like it's worth stopping here and asking ourselves, like, how did we get here, and who's listening, right? Like, I could see from a cursory view of who this author was. She's not a major contributor to CNN. She's got like this history in,
Mhm.
in the vampire world, or writing
Yeah.
these kind of like lurid novels
Well,
that go into these mysterious
that's
type of
the other
cultures.
connection thing that's again wearing a mask, right? Because she's presenting the article like she's this neutral journalist investigating a
Mhm.
culture that she's not a part of and knows nothing about, right? So
And just
that's
stumbled
another,
across.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's another sort of fake identity that's presented in the article, because the article is
Hmm.
not presented as, I am part of this cool culture. Let me introduce you to some of
Yeah,
the
it's like as a sales
luminaries and
pitch.
leaders of
Yeah,
my of this subculture I'm
yeah,
part of, right? No, she's presenting it like she's just an impartial journalist who's come across this thing, right? And then
yeah,
so then there's these levels again of the fakery and the vampirism, and
yeah,
the wearing masks, like the masks on masks, all not connected to any essence, but we need to
hmm,
feed off of your essence to in
yeah,
order for any of this to be true, right? Because
yeah,
that's again, and this again, so it's like there's a CNN level of like CNN needs us to believe that CNN is still doing journalism for CNN to
yeah,
exist. This journalist is also wearing this mask of like, I'm putting for this mask of me being a journalist for CNN and not a Marxist propagandist or a member of this
yeah,
or someone who's promoting this vampire culture. So I'm also
yeah,
wearing these masks that I need you to believe in order for
yeah.
this thing to exist, and we have that vampire nature. And then it's just on this whole subculture, which are, at the same time trying to be these things that are not human, but
Mm,
also want us to acknowledge their humanity, which is like another
yeah.
huge contradiction. And also trying, but in order,
Hmm.
uh masks on masks on masks, all of it needing, we need you to believe, we need you to believe,
Mm,
we need you to believe. This whole thing falls apart unless you believe, right? Because we don't have
yeah.
any essence, we don't have any self-sustaining vitality,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's there's all those levels is a disembodiment, right? So there's that
Mm,
personal disembodiment. There's the disembodiment of CNN to who they actually are, of the journalist, of the vampire mask.
yeah.
And
I
I
don't know
think
about, I'd use
there's.
the word disembodiment. Like I use
Hmm.
essence. I think our friend Sam uses nature, because
Hmm.
there's still a body there, right? There's still like this building that's CNN, and there's still these vampires are still, they have their identities, and even though their identities are fake, they still have a body too that's connected, but it's not really
Yeah.
connected to the spirit, which is why they need to feed off of other. They go through the symbolic act of feeding off of other people's blood, or they actually just directly admit that they're feeding off of other people's spirit, because
Right.
they have no
Yeah.
connection to spirit anymore.
Yeah.
They've
Or
separated
yeah.
themselves.
So maybe better. It's the projection, right? So you're not in it. You're projecting the thing, and you want other people to buy into it. but it is not actually that thing, right?
Yeah.
It's this projected image of this thing you're trying to create. So you're not really in your own.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm just objecting to the word body necessarily. It's because it's really being, like you're not really being the thing. There's still a body there, right? There's still the material flesh there, but it's not connected to the spirit anymore. So it's the being. I don't. There's no like disembeinged, but I think maybe that's. I'm putting words in your mouth. Stop me if I'm off the wrong on the wrong tack on this one, Dan. But is it sort of am I
no,
sort of
no,
like
it's that's no, that's good. I mean, I like the way I like the way you're framing it, right? That to me,
okay?
that's the,
We're still
um,
finding a frame.
yeah, we're still finding a frame, and I like the levels, right?
Mhm.
I think that's kind of like, it's like a cascading effect, right? So
Yes.
whether it's the, CNN that's starting it, and then creating these opportunities for the journalists to find the lifestyles, and then all of these different levels have to start at the beginning because they get it wrong in the beginning, and then so it's going to manifest throughout everything that the thing does. And I think in a lot of ways, I think, um, we still CNN is still a major institution. Whether or not people have flocked to other different outlets, whether more conversations are going on, person to person, rather than everybody investing so much in these cable news outlets, they still have a place in our culture. They're still important. They still develop these
Yeah.
conversations. Whether people are chopping up little headlines and then distributing it, they have an influence. So one of the things I think that struck me was like, why are they still talking about these why are they promoting or pushing so hard on these very extremely marginalized ideas when the ratings have absolutely collapsed? And everybody understands that one of the reasons is because we're kind of not interested in these. There's other more important things that are going on in the
Yeah.
world. And as they're peddling these different ideas, which really don't resonate with kind of mainstream America,
Yeah.
people peel off. People
See,
peel off, but yet they still are pushing these ideas and pushing these narratives. And so the question to me was, how far are they willing to go? Like,
I think that
what's enough?
the question answer to that question for me is different than a lot of people because other people think that they're going to be stopped by the whole profit margin thing, profit meritable thing, like that. We could also talk about woke Disney
Mm-hmm.
and all these other companies that are losing institutional credibility, like just bleeding institutional credibility
Mm-hmm.
and money, right? So they're supposed to be for-profit companies. They're bleeding money, they're bleeding credibility. So you think, oh, why won't they just stop? Why won't they just stop? And I think that one
Mm-hmm.
thing that we're not seeing is like in the financial markets, right? Is that we see this push towards ESG, right?
Mm-hmm.
Environmental, social, and governance. They don't want it to be about profit anymore in the boardrooms. They want to be about these other things. And when you create that multiplicity of it, it's like, oh, it's not just about money anymore. It's about other goods or other things that we're seeking. That
Mm-hmm.
creates the confusion and it allows those people to say, well, it gives them more latitude because now it doesn't matter if it makes money or not. If we're pursuing these other things, then we can justify what we're doing, right? Gives them
Mm-hmm.
more control over the system. And it gives them greater power to sort of dictate reality and follow these agendas without any sort of recourse. So
Yeah.
so it's happening up at the boardroom level, but even in these institutions, what I think people aren't really cluing in is like they don't care, right? They're once the institution becomes vampiric like this, like once it's just a
Mm-hmm.
mask, it's separated from its essence. CNN doesn't care that it's no longer a news agency anymore. Its only value to the
Mm-hmm.
people, the actual force that is behind the mask is to spread the propaganda, is to do this
Mm-hmm.
Marxist thing. And and if the credibility is burnt in the process of that, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
If because ultimately the agenda is to destroy everything that is, right? It's a resentment of being. Right. That's why
Mm-hmm.
the snake Ouroboros snake is eating its own tail.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Is because
Yeah.
because it's consuming. So
Yeah.
see, so it CNN become losing all its institutionally credibility and burning to the ground furthers
Mm-hmm.
their agenda. Right. They see it as that. because then that's
Mm,
one less in that's putting forth the revolution. And
hmm
they if they can use it as a tool until it does that, then
hmm
it's even
Yeah,
better. So it's
yeah,
not
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. Like I can see,
there's yeah there's no limiting
there's a
principle. There's no
yeah,
limiting. Their whole point, like the whole point of art, and that's what you see too, is to
yeah,
destroy the concept of limiting principles. That's what that professor was talking about, right? Is
mm,
is the whole thing of we're centering these marginalized people who are seeking marginalization because they will just destroy the center even better. They will destroy the hierarchy of being much faster. And so
hmm
so these institutions, part of that is these institutions have to be destroyed. So there's no long-term plan for them to preserve the institution. Burning the
hmm
institution down is part of the long-term goal.
yeah,
Right?
it
Like
is.
get
It's a
yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. So, but there, I mean, the limiting principle in a corporation would be you run out of money, right? Like there are some walls you're going to run up against, and I think an interesting phenomenon in the last few
Okay, yeah. Well,
years that
CNN
has
runs out
opened
of
that
gas
up
when
is that
it runs out of money, but then they'll have
right.
already sped out to the other Marxist institutions. They'll be burning down the other institutions. So I'm not saying that CNN
Sure, no, that's
will
true. But the
cease to
interesting thing that's
exist,
going on is
but they
that
don't care.
yeah, they don't care. But eventually, um, I guess the phenomenon I'm pointing to is that in corporate America, you might have seen a lot of this fall apart before it went anywhere, right? But in the last few years, we've had a consolidation in corporate America where a lot of the corporations aren't running themselves; they're in ownership to these larger investment companies, and so there's a lot more latitude as to what they can do, and they're not necessarily serving the shareholder. So what you're
Yeah.
pointing to earlier with like ESG, it's that we're trying to reconceive or revalue what it means to be a shareholder. So now a shareholder is more than just somebody who owns stock in the company who votes and once a year at the
Well,
meetings
it's the board of
and
directors.
yeah, instead of having a board of directors and deciding
It
the
is no,
future.
yeah. You're putting too much of a positive spin on a very bad thing in my mind.
What's that?
It's because the what they're trying to destroy is the concept of profit as an ultimate metric of success. That's why they brought in like environment, social, and governance, and then they because you can then you bring those in as competitive metrics of success to profit.
Hmm.
Then you can basically you can spin a tail for whatever you want to do at that point, right? So then
Right,
you
and
control.
I would say that just uh, the structure of a corporation in and of itself has limitations that wouldn't allow a lot of what's going on to go on if it wasn't for outside investing firms that can take a different approach. It's changing the corporate model, so it's not about it's
Mhm.
not about earnings anymore, right? It can
Yeah,
be about ESG. It could be about another value system
yeah,
that's now foisted on the stockholders, and that's why you got to change the name. So it's no longer going to be about shareholders of the company. Now now it's about a new value system.
yeah.
So
Spreading the agenda.
I think that's interesting, and I honestly can't see these two systems of economics are at loggerheads right now, and it wouldn't have been available. This wouldn't have been an avenue that Marxists could have taken 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Well, they've been working.
Those
They've
doors
been
wouldn't have been
setting the
open.
ground for that long. I mean,
That's
like
right.
yeah, they they've been setting the stage for this for quite some time, and you're right. It's because the system has become so corrupt that they get away with they can move things this far, right?
Yeah,
And
but the real fine point I'm making is not that it's corrupted, but that we have a new economy, right? And we now have trillions of dollars that oversee the multinational
but
corporations.
but it's fake money. It's corrupt money, right? It's not
Right.
connected to real things. It's been, and that's I mean,
That's
I don't want
interesting.
to bring
Yeah,
this
that's
into
interesting.
yeah. I mean, like there's the whole
Yeah.
thing of
No, no,
going
that's
going
very,
with
very
fiat
interesting.
currency.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very much possible. Like that's one of the results of fiat currency is like you can talk
Mhm.
about all this inflation
Yeah.
as like underlying the inflation or what's causing the inflation that could burn into hyperinflation is this idea of it's a process of fiat currency, which is actually money that's being created by the central banks, and it's and being leveraged as a system of control, and
Yeah.
it's
Synthetic
intrinsically
wealth
corrupt money.
promoting synthetic ideas.
Well, yeah, or false wealth, promoting
Yeah.
false ideas, and that's actually what drives this. Is it that becomes part of the corruption, because now the banks have false wealth and false hope, right? That they have to
Mm.
maintain, that they're invested in, so they can no longer discern. To bring it back to discernment, right?
Mm.
Is what we're doing here, why I try and promote the dialogos, is that we need to get back to finding Christ's plan in all things, right? We need to get back
Mm-hmm.
to finding the truth, the true, the beautiful, and the good of things. But a lot of what we have in our society, because we all have we all have this connection to the sin, this attachment to lies and false beliefs, like some people might believe that they're a vampire, and CNN might
Mm-hmm.
believe that it's a news organization still. We have these attachments to these things. We do not want to discern the truth. We do not want the truth revealed. We do not want people to connect to what's good, true, and beautiful. And so we
Mm-hmm.
have these psychotechnologies like spin, like the Marxist dialectic, which circle around things, which stop the conversation from moving forward, and
Mm-hmm.
that maintains these false beliefs. And I think that there's a connection to, like, with ESG and moving away from the
Mm-hmm.
profit margin. Like, profit margin is in some sense getting down to brass tax. What's real for the corporation? Is the corporation actually
Mm-hmm.
making money? Yes or no? Right? Is what
Mm-hmm.
ideally we can, there's so many weeds here, but ideally is what
Mm-hmm.
what you're trying to connect it. And this whole thing of introducing ESG is creating
Mm-hmm.
more of more room for the snakes to thrive, more room for the conversation never to go for. It's like, because as soon as someone starts saying about profit, it's like, well, what about the environment? Well, as soon as they start saying about the environment, well, what about governance? Well, as soon as they start saying about government,
Mm-hmm.
well, what about this social impact, right? So you can have these
Mm-hmm.
conversations that never go anywhere and will never actually discern the truth. And the reason for it is because everyone has a connection to the sin. No one wants to see the
Mm-hmm.
eschaton, the coming of Christ, coming and saying, "Okay, I'm the truth, the good, and the light," and all these evils, all this
Mm-hmm.
false hopes, all these partial truths evaporating and being
Mm-hmm.
exposed, right? So the complete falsehoods, the shadows, are exposed
Mm-hmm.
as false, and the things that
Yeah. So
partial
yeah.
truths, all the partial truths
Mm-hmm.
are revealed for what they are. So CNN, if we're allowed to discern the truth, then people will see CNN for what it actually has become, which
Mm-hmm.
is a husk and a horrible thing. And all these people who work for CNN and wear these masks, these pretentious masks of being journalists, will be exposed as the frauds that they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing will happen in the boardroom. The same thing will happen, and that's what drives it. Is that we all have these snakes. The line between good and evil runs through every human heart, and this attachment to the evil keeps us,
Mm-hmm.
to the sins and our mistakes and our corruption, keeps us from or
Yeah.
invests us in
Yeah.
stopping the truth from being discerned.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Another way that I've looked at it, and then I can see this line running through lots of different institutions, is that it's an attractive idea to a lot of people because when you lose control of the thing, the tangible things that's in front of you, the metrics that you can actually measure, and when they're not working in your favor, you can sort of conjure up all these other things that can work. So the same thing is happening in our school system, where when math and English and literacy, we're just absolutely falling all over ourselves, and we're falling behind on the with these metrics that are very easy to decipher. We can point to these other moral things and say, well, look, we're actually getting ahead
Yeah.
in equity, or we're getting ahead in all these. So these are attractive ideas
Social
because it's
emotional learning.
the false sense that
Yeah.
we're actually accomplishing something, right? Which
Yes.
is
I was
you
actually,
know
but and then there's I mentioned critical pedagogy is in my sort of list of Marxist things, because that's a very serious one. Is Paulo Freire, who actually who sees, which has become sort of the um it was prominent in North America in the mid 80s, and is now the cornerstone of most of North American pedagogy. Most of the North American education system is this Paulo Freire guy and his critical pedagogy program, which is another Marxist form, whereas like we talked about how queer Marxism is destroying the normal, sees the normal as the private property that needs to be destroyed. Critical pedagogy sees literacy
Hmm.
as the property that needs to be destroyed, right? They see your skill in the existing system, like your 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
That's just training people to perpetuate the existing system. And of course, you want to have revolution, you want to destroy the existing system as a Marxist, so you have to destroy literacy. And that's
Hmm.
what they're actually like. So we have, and it's the complete perversion of our education system, but that's what's going on now. And they're creating these new metrics, like as you said, because to hide the truth of what's going on.
Hmm.
And a big part of the truth of what's going on is like now they're not interested in educating our kids. They're not interested in them learning math, writing, and in a sense, you could actually say that that's counter. They see that as counterproductive because they see that as perpetuating their current tyranny. What they want to do is make them into activists, right? That
Hmm.
complain about everything, little Marxist
Hmm.
advocates who know about all these social issues, and complain about the world's problems, and are very resentful about the state of the world, and resentful of being, resentful of God, right? That's what
Hmm.
they want. And in order to do that and have people see what's going on, they have to, as you say, create these new metrics, these new ways of explaining things, um, that don't jive. Otherwise, people would see, people would know, that that the school system is failing, but it's
Hmm.
only failing in our eyes. It's not failing in the Marxist
Hmm.
eyes because they are successfully making more resentful revolutionaries. They're making more wretched, angry people who will, you know,
It's perfect.
will
Right?
disrupt the
Yeah.
center. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's like I guess it leads me to the idea is like how long can it go on for? So specifically with the idea of CNN, well, um, we've seen like we sort of, I don't know if we ever talked about it, but one of the things that I was writing about was that um, you see a rejigging. There's a rejigging going on, within the world of the media empires, right? So um, they're separating, they're folding, they're getting rid of talent, they're culling, they're changing things because they need to be relevant, right? And they don't just need the affirmation of their viewers in order to be relevant. They need viewers, right? And they're getting less and less of them as people are
That's part of
uh,
the vampire aspect, right?
yeah, yeah,
Right. This is what
yeah,
reality is
yeah,
they only have the power as long as they have the attention and people believe.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that
So
so
I
the
think,
danger isn't the thing that's the limiting factor isn't necessarily the money, it's the belief.
yeah,
How can they
yeah,
keep shareholders believing that these are profitable companies, and it's not just a
yeah,
mask for a Marxist agenda, the ones who are actually are interested in making money? Can they make the public continue to
yeah,
believe
yeah,
that that this is
yeah,
a worthwhile watching of their time, or are
yeah,
people falling away? And
yeah.
it's yeah, because they're realizing that they're running out of victims to suck spiritual energy from.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really what in a lot of ways. I know a lot of people that they turned off CNN, they turned off the mainstream media because it was just sucking their life energy out of them. Like it
Hmm.
was literally just making them depressed. So they didn't necessarily have a big moral stance. They just were exhausted.
Hmm.
And that was it. And they just really haven't gone back. So there's a lot of different reasons why I think people are just peeling off this narrative that is very unfulfilling, right? It's not
Yeah.
offering you any predictability. You can't, your life isn't improved because you know a little bit more and you can make better decisions. So it's not really giving you anything tangible you can walk away with, and it's not making you feel any better about your life and yourself because there's an obsession with destruction and deconstructing, and
Yeah.
it's demoralizing, right? So
And this is actually why I'm so full of hope and faith now, right? Is because
mhm,
I see Christ on the move now, right? I see that like we're moving into this period, like they've been holding it off, but they can't really stop Christ. And this sort of
mhm,
we're entering this period of eschaton, right? Where
mhm,
you know the things will be exposed, right? Where
mhm,
these lies will be exposed, and it happens inevitably because um the Marxist ideology is ultimately self-defeating, because
Mm,
the more they succeed in destroying things,
mhm,
the less there is for them to hide behind, right? Like
mm,
there's,
yeah.
they destroy what is, and
Hmm.
when you destroy what is, well, all that's left is what you can't destroy, which is Christ, the good, the beautiful, and the
Yeah.
true. And you make it easier for people to see, right? The more that
Hmm.
they burn these institutions into the ground, the
Hmm.
less distractions there are for them to hide behind.
Yeah, and it's true. So like if you're if you're a revolutionary or an activist or a Marxist or
Hmm.
whatever it is, you're not so concerned about salvaging the institution. You're completely capable and willing to burn it all to the ground in your pursuit of the thing. But
Yeah,
the question is what we have here in the West strong enough to resist it, and um, are people experiencing everything being burnt down to the ground around them capable of turning it around? Like these are the
yeah.
questions I think that are, they plague me, they plague other people, and I think there's signs to argue in either direction, right? So one of the things with
Well,
CNN is
it's a battle. It's a
you'll
spiritual
see that
warfare.
it's spiritual
It's
warfare. So this
Yeah,
is something that the jury's still out for me, right? But one of the things I was toying with is that when you see the new CEO of Warner Discovery, who's now taken
mhm.
over Time Warner and all of their assets and HBO, this massive media empire.
Mhm. Oh, I lost you. Well, that was a bit of abrupt ending to an episode, but that was my conversation with Dan, talking about vampirism articles at CNN, and I hope that we had you had a good chance. You saw the dialogos as it progressed, and we revealed some truth to you. So take care and catch you next time. Residuum revertiter, viva Christo Rey.